was about 7, and like most younger kids, I never wanted to sleep when I was supposed to. Constantly in and out of my bed for water, to go to the bathroom, or to tell my parents in the living room I couldn't sleep, so maybe they'd let me watch a little more TV. After about the 4th "I want water," I finished my cup, and my mum playfully chased me to my room, but stopped about halfway when my back was turned. As I entered my room, I saw my dad in my closet, with the widest smile on his face, ear to ear, teeth and all. Unnatural is the way to put it. It just wasn't humanly possible how big his smile was. I stopped in stride, and he just looked at me. He didn't move. He just stared at me, almost like he was going to jump out any second. Confused and scared, I turned and jogged back to my living room to tell my mum to tell Dad to stop scaring me. As I turned the corner, sitting on the couch was my mum and Dad, with an angry look on their faces, asking, "What is it now?" I don't know what to make of it. I just started crying. I'm 21 now, and it still gives me chills, like someone poured ice cubes down my back just thinking about it. My mum recently mentioned it as I was cleaning my room, and asked if I remembered why I wanted this room so bad. It's been buried deep in my brain ever since, and it all came flooding back when she asked. I remember it like it was yesterday. Was this a doppelganger? Figment of my young imagination? Or something sinister, trying to mess with me even more by looking like my dad? So, this all started in 2021, just when the pandemic first started to die down in my area. At this point, the girl I was with, whom I'll call Faye for the purposes of this story, and I had been together about 3 years. But one day that spring, one of my friends came to me and asked who the girl they had seen me with at the store was. I was obviously confused, as I had not left my block that day. My friend didn't buy it. He legit thought he had seen me with another woman. Then, other people began coming to me and picking up conversations we had never started, bringing up things we had not talked about. It started getting really weird. I'm pretty sure the only reason Faye didn't believe the stories was because one day my mum was bringing her home from work because I was suddenly stricken very ill and was unable to drive that day. On a side note, being suddenly stricken very ill is the thing that happens when other people you know see your doppelganger. They stopped at a gas station my family frequented, and she saw my twin. Of course, both my mother and Faye both knew I was in bed at home, sick, and I was on the phone with Faye, whom had called me to ask if I wanted or needed anything. But sightings of my dark double continued for almost 2 years before the doppelganger disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. To this day though, I'll still have people I've never met come up to me and act like they know me, though it's far less frequent now. When Faye and I broke up, a lot of the bizarre things like that went away with her. Faye is Cajun and related to a good many swamp witches from the bayou. Also, her mother apparently offended the spirit of Marie Laveau by performing some kind of ritual while near the infamous witch's mausoleum. That may or may not be true, but one thing that cannot be disputed is that dark things are attached to Faye and other women in her family. One night, I was doing my makeup and listening to music, but while listening I heard my name and thought it was from the music, so I turned it off. Suddenly I heard my mum, or so I thought, call my name. I heard someone running down the hall and realized I'm alone right now, so I rushed to lock the door. My mum starts banging on the door and tells me to open it, but I know it wasn't her since she would kick down the door. I start crying, but after 2 hours, it stopped. I go back to doing my makeup with my door locked still and post a picture of my makeup results on Insta. Someone sends me a DM and it says they could see an old woman outside of my window in the back of the picture. So I rush to close my blinds, but I see the old woman. She was crying and begging to be let in. I closed the blinds and went back to sleep. The next morning my mum came back home from work and I told her all about it, and it never happened again. I, female 21, live in a town of about 50,000 people. Over the last year, I've had people come up to me at work and ask if I just got a new job. Confused, I always just say no. A few months ago, my mum calls me and asks if I'm in my local pet store where my stepdad is shopping. And I say, no. And my mum sends me a picture of who even I thought was me. I looked at the picture and was wondering if I'd lost a bit of weight. I looked good and then asked her where that picture was from. And she told me my stepdad just took it while shopping. Apparently, he thought it was me and walked up to her and started talking to her, only to realize it wasn't me. Here's where it gets weird. I'm covered in deep self-harm scars, and the girl in the photo had the same scars as me. I also have a snake tattoo on my right arm. So did she. Same style and everything. She also had the exact same glasses on that I wear daily. She was even wearing an outfit I'd worn before. Now I have this picture of this woman who lives in my town who looks scarily like me. I want to meet her. I started asking people what her name is and explaining I have a doppelganger. Her name sounds like Carrie, but it isn't. I can't remember what the woman who came into work a few weeks ago said her name was. I don't know if I'm losing my mind, but there's too many coincidences here. I'm a micro-celebrity on TikTok. Do I have a stalker who's obsessed and wants to be me? Or maybe an old friend who follows my moves? I sound like I'm going crazy, but even I thought this woman was me. It's been weighing on my mind for months. Has anyone else had something like this happen to them? Just last week, something truly strange happened that I can't shake from my mind. It was early Saturday evening, and the sun was just dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across my backyard. I was relaxing in my living room, getting ready to settle into a night of TV, when I caught sight of my neighbor, who we'll call Mr. Jenkins, standing in the yard. Mr. Jenkins is an older gentleman, known for his routine walks and worn brown coat with matching hat. There he was, just beyond the flower bed, standing perfectly still and facing my house. I tried to rationalize his presence there. Maybe he needed help or just wanted to chat. Feeling a mix of curiosity and concern, I headed outside to greet him. As I stepped onto the patio and called out his name, he made a small nod in acknowledgement, then slowly turned and ambled behind my shed. I quickened my pace to catch up, thinking he might have wandered off. But as I rounded the corner, he was nowhere to be found. Confused, I stood for a moment, scanning the surroundings. It seemed impossible for him to have left so quickly without any sign. Perplexed, I returned indoors and decided to call our mutual friend, another neighbor, to see if they'd seen him around. To my surprise, she told me Mr. Jenkins had left for a week-long vacation that very morning. He was supposed to be hundreds of miles away visiting his son. My stomach dropped as I tried to process her words. If Mr. Jenkins was gone, who was in my backyard? Each evening since, as the sun sets and shadows stretch across my lawn, I find myself peering out the window, half expecting to see him there again, wondering if he'll return. Around 15 years ago, when both of my kids were toddlers, I was putting them to bed one night, and my son was adamant that he wear his favorite red race car pajamas. I happily obliged, helped him change into them, and tucked him into bed. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with a friend who had come over to chat and catch up. The way that my apartment was set up, you could see my kid's bedroom doorway from the kitchen table. My friend and I were talking for a while before we were suddenly interrupted by the sound of my son screaming. We both turned and looked at the bedroom doorway and saw my son standing there loudly crying and shrieking and wearing his green pajamas with airplanes on them. Everything inside of me was screaming that this was wrong. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end and a cold shiver shot down my spine. My friend and I wordlessly stared at each other for a second. We both knew that my son couldn't change his pajamas by himself yet. We looked back at the doorway, and my son was gone. We ran to the bedroom and found him tucked in bed, still sleeping peacefully in his red race car pajamas. My friend asked me if I saw him standing there in his green airplane pajamas, and I confirmed that I had. My friend freaked out and left. I slept on my kids' bedroom floor that night to make sure nothing happened to them. My friend and I still talk about it to this day. It's one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me. My son, of course, doesn't remember any of it, but he loves hearing the story of how his doppelganger scared the crap out of us. A couple of weeks ago, something strange happened. It started on a regular evening after a quiet dinner with my partner. As we settled back home, I went into the kitchen to wait for our dog to finish his backyard adventure so I could lock up and get to bed. From the corner of my eye, I saw my boyfriend. The sight was comforting until I realized he wore an unsettling grin, standing in the doorway of our guest room, a light nod inviting me to join him. I was sure my boyfriend had gone off to change in the bedroom, so this caught me off guard. He turned and walked into the guest bedroom without turning on the lights. Confused but curious, I followed. As I rounded the corner, the room appeared empty. I flicked on the light, and it was indeed empty. This was odd. There was no other exit other than the door I stood in, or the window which, due to the age of the property, is quite stiff and hard to open, and I would have definitely heard it. I checked under the guest bed and in the closet, but once again, nothing. I called out to my boyfriend, and I heard his voice from down the hall behind me in the bedroom, where I thought he was originally. I decided not to say anything to him, thinking maybe I was just exhausted. I can't help but wonder, what did it want from me? This story isn't as crazy as many stories here, but it freaked me out at the time. For context, this happened in 2010 to 2011, when I was 18 and my sister was 13 or 14. Our city's baseball team had won the World Series that year, and my family, mum, dad, sister and myself, went downtown for the celebratory parade. We arrived downtown about 15 minutes before the parade began and found a decent spot to stand, right up front. Me, being an avid people watcher, began scanning the sea of people standing on the side of the street. That's when I noticed a girl, my sister's age, standing directly across from my sister, and I became fixated on her. She was turned, talking to her family, but when she turned back to face the street, I couldn't believe my eyes. She looked identical to my little sister, who was standing right beside me. And I don't mean just your typical doppelganger. My sister is a skinny, white, blonde girl, so we've seen other girls who look like her over the years, and this was different. They were like mirror images of each other. She even had the same glasses and t-shirt, and same colored jeans on. The only difference was this girl's hair was pushed back, and my sister always has her hair hanging in her face at that age. I was a bit speechless for a minute, and then got the attention of my parents and said, "That girl over there looks exactly like Brenna." They looked, and I could see that they were also a bit taken aback by just how much they looked alike, and they agreed with me and pointed her out to my sister. As soon as my sister noticed her, the other girl noticed her at the same time, and they just stared at each other for a minute. At this point, we are all silent and just looking at this girl looking at my sister. The other girl's parents notice us staring, then notice my sister. And even though they didn't acknowledge us, I could tell they were thinking the same things we were. I could tell they noticed the resemblance and were weirded out. I had my digital camera with me, and I discreetly zoomed in on her and even took a picture because I knew people would not believe us when we told them. The zoomed in picture was even freakier. It looked like I had just taken a photo of my actual sister. The parade started not long after, so we turned our attention to that for the moment. When I looked back across the street a few minutes later, the girl and her family were gone. We never saw them again. The other weird part of the story, which is the reason why I share it, is that I made a Facebook photo album that evening with all the pictures I took from the parade, including the picture of my sister's doppelganger, with a caption that said something like, "You may think this is Brenna, but it's not. Isn't this freaky?" I recall receiving many comments from people who were stunned at the resemblance. A few years later, I was telling a friend about it and went to the Facebook album to show them, and the photo was gone. All of the other photos from that day were still there, except for that one. I guess Facebook could have removed it for some reason, but it didn't make sense why just that photo would have been removed. Anyway, I know it's not that crazy of a story compared to many others here, but I still vividly remember how weirded out and uneasy my sister and I were after that experience. Thanks for listening. This took place just a few days ago, and has left me on edge ever since. It was a normal weekday night, and after a long day, I was readying myself for bed. My bathroom is small, snugly fitting a toilet, sink, and mirror above that. I was brushing my teeth, glancing at my sleepy eyes in the reflection. As I rinsed my mouth and looked up, I noticed something odd. The mirror reflected my bathroom, but it wasn't just me staring back. Behind my reflection, there was another figure. It was vague at first, like a smear or a shadow. But as my eyes adjusted, it became clearer. A person standing behind me. Their expression was cheerful, unsettlingly so, with a wide smile that was somehow void of warmth. A jolt of fear shot through me. I spun around instinctively, expecting to confront an intruder. To my astonishment, the bathroom was empty. Heart pounding against my chest, I turned back to the mirror. and the figure had vanished without a trace. Confused and shaken, I backed out of the room. My rational mind told me it was a trick of the light or an overactive imagination. Yet deep down, it felt far too real. I left the bathroom light on as I retreated to bed, my mind racing with possibilities. What unsettled me more was that the more I thought about it, the more I recognized the face. It was my own, twisted in such a manner that I could not recognize it instantly. Each time I pass that mirror now, I hesitate, half expecting to see that smiling version of myself return, wondering what or who it was. After doing some digging around online, I've found other people's accounts of doppelgangers. Could that be what this is? And if so, for what purpose? Have you ever imagined ghosts eating salt? Well, there are tales of people trying to make quick bucks by selling salt to spirits in cemeteries at night. But to walk out alive, there are two important rules. First, you must never look up to see them. Second, you must not run out of the cemetery before dawn breaks. It is believed that if you can observe these two rules, then the hell notes they will pay you for the salt will turn into real money by daybreak. I personally have never come across anybody who tried it, but while doing mission training in a cemetery during my army days, I've seen people going to some Muslim cemetery at 3 a.m. I couldn't be sure what they were up to though. Anyway, for those who are interested, this is the correct procedure I heard. Go to a cemetery wearing a jacket with a hood. Bring a lot of mahjong paper to spread over the floor, and don't forget the salt wrapped in packets. Soon, hands will appear in front of your face asking for salt. You pass it to them, and they will give you money. At this point, never look up. When the sun rises, pack up your things and leave, and never look back. Now, the question is, why do ghosts need so much salt? Well, according to experts, spirits need salt to look better after they die, because their bodies begin to decay. Salt helps them maintain their personal hygiene, just like we need water to clean up. Another important thing is that your supply of salt must never run out. So get a few baskets if possible, and sit there doing nothing but looking at it. So, no matter what happens, you can only look at the basket. According to sources, each hell note they will give you will turn into $50, and you have to spend it within a week. Good luck. I'm going to share a story with you that I heard personally from my retired uncle, who used to be a gravedigger at a Muslim cemetery. But try reading this story alone at midnight. My uncle used to work at the Muslim cemetery by digging holes during his prime years. He is a tall and big fellow, but he does not have any proper education, which, as a result, made him end up with such a vocation. It is the most peaceful and non-stressful job, he said. However, he added that the beginning was very tough, and it takes a strong, brave, and clean, pure heart with lots of faith to endure the initial stages. When he started the job about 40 years ago, he had to dig about 10 holes per day on average under close supervision. And sometimes, there were more holes needed to be dug, depending on the death rates. Then, there was this memorable night where he had to work overtime due to unfinished digging. There were a few diggers working that night, but they were not working in close proximity to each other. The diggers actually preferred to work the graveyard shift as it was cooler at night and the soil was softer to dig. They claimed anyway. As an apprentice, my uncle was accompanied by his supervisor for the initial weeks, after which he would be left alone to dig independently. His supervisor also cautioned him many times in a few things such as, do not utter a single word if he sees, hears, smells, or feels something unpleasant, but recite the Quran instead, or say the prayers. My uncle wondered how disastrous the situation could be. Then the moment came. He was digging a hole when he heard voices from the filled graves beside the empty ones, about a few meters away from where he was stationed. He ignored it, remembering his superior's warning. Then he heard it again and again. He kept hearing voices till he felt so curious to check it out. Some of the voices he heard were very sorrowful and mournful, while some were screaming in pain. My uncle recited his prayers quietly in his heart and kept digging. Then, when he took a momentary rest after digging 2 holes, he turned his face back towards the plot of land which had already been occupied. He then saw, with his own eyes, something that he had never imagined before in his life. A few human figures in loose clothing gliding from one tombstone to another. Some sitting and crying sorrowfully, while some seemed to be standing without a single movement, staring at my uncle. My uncle rubbed his eyes again to confirm, as it had been quite misty that night. Then my uncle's legs started to tremble and shake. Then suddenly his supervisor touched his shoulder and signaled him to ignore those things and keep digging. Then this time it was worse. While he was digging the 3rd hole, something flew into the first empty hole that had been dug by my uncle. A woman's voice was then heard in that hole. My uncle did not dare to look inside that hole, but he and his supervisor heard that woman's voice clearly, crying and asking for help, wanting to be released from the misery and pain that she had faced. Then my uncle's supervisor quickly asked my uncle to leave that place and to dig in another area for the time being. I think I better stop my story here, as my imagination starts to get over me and my family are already sleeping at this moment. This story happened to me. It was primary 6 school camping at our school in Bedok, near my house. I heard many stories about that school. One of them is that the school was built on a Japanese cemetery, and that is true. One night when we were asleep, I wanted to go to the toilet, but none of my friends were awake. So I went to the toilet by myself. I went to the toilet near the canteen. When I got there, I saw many people lining up. When I turned around to stretch my body and looked back again, there was nobody. So I went to the toilet quickly. When I got back to the hall, I was shocked to see that all my friends were snoring. I quickly shut my eyes and went to sleep. The next morning, I asked my friends if they went to the toilet last night, and all of them answered no. In the evening, I was playing soccer in the field. The ball went out of the field, so I went to get it. As I was retrieving the ball, I saw a man sitting up in a tree with a long sword. I knew it was a Japanese, because he wore clothes exactly like during the Japanese occupation. On the spot, I fainted. The next thing I knew, I was at home. From that time onwards, I did not go there for any camping. Now, the school is abandoned. For those who are faint-hearted, please don't read this. This is a story about a soldier doing sentry duty at night at Lim Chu Kang. Lim Chu Kang is a cemetery area, a forested region, and a live firing area used by the Singapore Armed Forces, SAF, the Army of Singapore. The story begins here. Everything is written in his own words and is based on real-life encounters. Only God knows it. First up, it was the weekend and I had to do guard duty at the 2nd Battalion Singapore Guards Unit, located remotely at Lim Chu Kang, one of the last few unurbanized areas in Singapore. There were, if I remember correctly, 14 of us on duty that day. 2 NCOs, 6 sentry guards, and 6 prowlers. There were 2 sentry points and an ammo dump to guard. I was assigned to guard the main gate. I considered myself lucky because the NCO post was just 50 meters behind me. Once in a while they would come out to smoke and keep me company. I'm not easily frightened. In fact, I enjoy being in the open foggy night like this one. The whole mood was mystifying. There was almost a full moon, the sound of crickets, the hooting of owls, and a smooth cold wind. I was savoring the serenity when I heard a soft wail. My back was facing the gate, and it was from there that the wailing was emanating, so I turned. There was nothing. I looked toward the NCOs. They were watching TV and wouldn't likely have heard anything. I thought nothing of it until I heard it again. So I went to the gate and looked out. To left, right, and into the distance. The only thing I saw were trees and a faint light some distance away. There was a house. I doubted the wailing was coming from there because the house was too far. I must admit, despite the fear, it was exciting and a little eerie. I felt goosebumps all over my body. It was the first time I had felt such a chill wash over me. As I turned to walk away from the gate, I heard it again. The wailing. This time it sounded close, right behind me. I froze in place. The wailing was beginning to really freak me out. I turned to look at the NCOs, but they were too engrossed in their television. I could see something from the corner of my eye. I turned and, dear God, it was real. I was staring at something I had only heard from other people. It was horrible. A floating green face with entrails hanging and blood dripping from this. This is no lie. I couldn't control my bladder, and I confess, I released. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity. I remember nearly coming to tears, wanting to scream but couldn't. The thing was looking at me with so much satisfaction. Thank God one of the NCOs called my name. He had noticed that I was not at my usual spot and thought something was amiss. He was absolutely right. After I heard his call, I remember feeling so relieved that I cried and nearly passed out. I was taken to the medical center and spent the night there. To this day, I shiver when I hear a wail, even in movies. Only God knows it. May peace be upon you. What I'm about to tell you is based on my true experience. In the past, I used to see things such as ghosts. Maybe spirit is a better word, but not anymore. It all started after I watched a movie with my sister at Lot 1 at 11 p.m. As we were walking, my sister wanted to go to the toilet and decided to take a shortcut on the way back to my auntie's house. While walking, we started to sing happily. But halfway, when we were about to walk past a car park, the shortcut way, I suddenly felt cold, and the hair on my neck seemed to be standing up. When that strange feeling came, I started to sing softer and softer. I was quiet for a long time when I finally couldn't bear it any longer and asked my sister whether she felt the same way. She told me that she too felt as if someone was following us all along, and we started to pray hard. My sister decided to wait a while under my auntie's block, just to let the thing go away. As we were waiting, praying, we suddenly heard a trolley coming out from the lift. Without waiting any longer, my sister quickly ran into the next lift as it suddenly opened, and she really needed to go to the toilet. When we reached the 7th floor, my sister saw that my auntie's door was wide open. She just dashed inside and went to the toilet, leaving me behind as I walked a bit slower. I was walking towards the door when I heard and saw a white figure trying to climb up the stairs, and I ran inside straight away. I saw my auntie and asked her who didn't lock the door, and she told me that it was my grandma. I told her everything, and she asked me to close the door, but I was scared. She told me that it was my grandma who pushed the trolley because she wanted to take old newspapers to sell them. That's not my first time seeing things in CCK, my aunt's place, but I've seen a lot of things, especially at the car park when walking at night and at the playground nearby. Whenever we passed by that area, shadows seemed to dance around the periphery of our vision. Sometimes, while at the playground, you could hear giggles or whispers coming from nowhere, as if unseen children were playing hide and seek. The chilling sensation and the inexplicable unease, they all pointed to an unseen world just brushing against ours. By the way, thanks to God, I can't see things anymore after drinking some prayed water. So to the readers who read this, especially those living at CCK, just be careful during the night, as maybe it's near the CCK cemetery. It was 6:15 p.m. in early 1996. The location, Chua Chung Kang Muslim Cemetery, Pusara Aman 1. Though I realized that it was quite late to be there, my main priority was to pay respects to my deceased grandparents and close friend. The place was gloomy as I stepped out of Service 172 and walked into the cemetery. The stonemasons had already started packing up, finishing for the day's engravings of tombstones. I reached my grandmother's graveside and started reciting some prayers for her while cleaning up the weeds off the burial ground. I left 10 minutes later and walked deeper into the cemetery grounds 5 minutes away to visit my deceased grandfather and close friend. I paid my respects and recited prayers for them. By then, it was already 6:45 p.m. The sun was setting into the horizon, not a soul around, and the dusk made the eerie glow from the tombstones stand out in the setting sun rays. Perfect for a photograph. Usually it would take approximately 15 minutes of brisk walking from there to the first cemetery bus stop. I did not reach the main road until 8 p.m., a full hour and 15 minutes of an unplanned journey. As I walked down Cemetery Path 12, I was drawn by the sorrowful sight of the tombstones, wondering when my time would come. I came upon a big tombstone engraved with the name Pak Zuba Said, the composer of Majula Singapura, the country's national anthem, who passed away in 1987. I did not realize that I had wandered away from my usual path, deeper into the cemetery grounds. Soon, I saw tombstones everywhere. The path had gradually disappeared from sight. I tried to find my way back, but to no avail. There were no street lamps in the cemetery. Who there needs street lamps anyway? So I had to grope my way around, tripping over small drains. My eyes seemed to be drawn to a particular tombstone. The date, 27th of November, 1983, the birth date of my younger sibling. I walked on and stumbled upon another tombstone 5 minutes away. It bore the date of another younger sibling, February 19th, 1978. Further on, I found June 19th, 1977, the birth date of my girlfriend. Why is this happening to me? I'm not prepared for all of this. I walked on, trying to find my way out of the various tombstones. I found my way to Muslim Cemetery Path 3. That's when I saw 10th September 1974 on a tombstone. My birth date. I'm seeing someone who died on the day I was born. It was an old tombstone with years of aging and engraved stone. Then I saw lights further up. It was the lights from the cemetery mosque. I walked briskly to the mosque and performed my prayers. It was already 8 p.m. by then. No one was around. I took my ablution and performed my evening prayers. As I looked on, I saw the eerie glow form on the tombstones in the background as a warning of this unforgettable journey. There seemed to be a hidden message somewhere within. What was it? One day my cousin and I went out together. We were enjoying ourselves so much that we did not notice it was almost time to go home. It was late at night, so my cousin decided to stay at my house. We decided to take a shortcut home and had to go through the graveyard. We were walking and talking when my cousin suddenly suggested we play a game to see who can copy the most tombs. You know, the name and details in 5 minutes. Thinking that only 5 minutes would do no harm, I played too. After 5 minutes, I went to find him. He was kissing the tomb of a beautiful girl. Then, he took the girl's picture and brought it home. From that day onwards, he locked himself up in the room, and one day he started talking like a girl. We were all very afraid and thought that he was just sick. That's why his voice changed. Then one night, I went to his room and found him. He was sitting there, talking to himself in a girly voice. He didn't seem to know that I was there. Then, I saw the picture of the girl. I went to pick it up, but then he started shouting to put his picture down a number of times, and his face changed. He changed to the beautiful girl in the picture. Only then did I know that my cousin had been possessed. I asked the girl to leave him, but she said no way. He destroyed my tomb. He took my picture away, she said. I asked, "What do you want before you can leave him?" "I want you to paste my picture back, now," she replied. I took the picture and rushed to the graveyard. I pasted the picture back and rushed home. The girl and my cousin were not there. I went back to the graveyard. There, I saw the girl and my cousin waving to me. I ran to the girl's grave, and there, I saw another tomb for my cousin. I was around 16 years old and on the phone with my boyfriend at the time. It was late at night and dark outside. I lived in the woods essentially. This is how it went. Me: "Hey, there are some really weird lights outside my window right now." Him: "What do you mean weird lights?" Me: "Like different colors and coming from above the trees, almost like a spotlight or something." Him: "Is it a helicopter?" Me: No. How would a helicopter get this close to my house and in the trees? And there is no sound. Man, this is really freaking me out. they're getting brighter. What the hell are they? End of conversation. The next morning I wake up in my bed with the phone off the hook and next to me. Yeah, this was before cell phone days. And I'm a little confused. I start to get ready for school and notice a very thin, long cut on my upper arm that is super tender but essentially healed. But it was not there last night. I get to school and my boyfriend is waiting by my locker and totally freaked out. He's happy to see me and confused as to what happened to our phone call last night. I can't remember anything past me saying, "What the hell are they?" He said that I said, "What the hell are they?" and then said, "I have to go to sleep now. Bye." And then it was radio silence. I didn't hang up the phone or any of the usual goodnight stuff we would usually say. And he just heard muffled noises for a few seconds. I've never slept through an entire night in my teen to adult life, so this was super freaky to me. We never really talked about what happened. I showed him my arm, and we never mentioned it again to this day. We still wonder what actually happened that night. I had two experiences a few years back. These weren't dreams, or didn't feel like them at least. I tried to convince myself that they were dreams, but deep down I know it actually happened. My first experience, I was sleeping on the couch in my living room. I woke up and felt a deep, primal fear immediately, almost as if I knew what was about to happen. A light shined in my living room and began to rapidly flash, almost faster than a strobe light. In the flashing, 2 or 3 small beings appeared next to me. They were short, probably only 3 to 4 feet tall, and looked like typical grey aliens. I remember just feeling frozen in fear. I stared at them for maybe a second or two, when I had the thought to get up and try to fight them off. The moment I thought that, everything went black. I woke up, and it was the next morning. For a couple of weeks after that, I had nightmares. I'm not sure of what exactly, but I just remember I kept waking up scared every night. The second time, I was sleeping again, dreaming. Suddenly, the dream stopped, and I woke up. In the instant I woke up, before I was even fully awake, I felt myself being sucked up into the sky. All I remember was looking straight up at the sky and stars, suddenly rising extremely fast up into the sky towards the stars. It only lasted a few seconds. I then jumped up and it was the next morning. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt real, down to feeling the cold air rushing by me. I haven't had any experiences since, but ever since then, I've always felt extremely uncomfortable looking up at the stars or even being outside alone at night. I always feel like something is watching me from up there. Let me preface this by saying yes, this happened when I was 7 years old. I know that memory can be tricky, but I have also thought about this experience every day since it happened. It's less important to me if this experience was real or not, and more important to me that whatever it was, it had a significant, long-lasting impact on my life. And the crazy thing is, it lasted just a few seconds. It was the night before or early morning of January 25th, 1999, Central California. And I only know the exact date because it was the only time it snowed here, in a really long time anyway. So you can still Google the newspaper articles about it. Anyway, basically I woke up, sat straight up in bed, and crouching on the bed, one knee bent on the bed, one leg off the bed, was a typical grey alien. Large head, big black eyes. To me, The skin looked greenish grey and had an almost rubbery or just very smooth texture. No nose, slit for a mouth, no visible ears. I remember it not wearing any clothing. It just stared at me, and I just remember feeling shocked, like not enough time to even feel terrified. That came the days, weeks, months after. For whatever reason, I just laid back down, turned on my side, put the covers over my head, and I guess I fell asleep. The whole next day I was thankfully partially distracted by a rare snow day. But I also was very aware that I would not be able to go to sleep without feeling petrified for a long time. I thought about telling my parents, but I didn't have a word for what I had seen. No reference for it. Didn't know it was an alien or a grey. For lack of a better word, it was totally alien and unknown to me. It wasn't until I was at a friend's house whose dad was watching a sci-fi movie that had typical greys in it that I learned to associate what I had seen with the word alien, and that they were at least real enough to be depicted on TV. And then, of course, I noticed them everywhere, in shows, movies, art, etc. I accept that this could have been a hallucination, or a very vivid nightmare, or whatever. Maybe I had seen them depicted on TV before, and my subconscious picked up on it. But it is a single event that led to a lifelong obsession with aliens and unexplained phenomena. Sometimes I wonder if that was the whole point of that experience in the first place, or if that's a part of the reason why they appear to people. Just so stories about them will continue to influence our culture, mythos, spirituality, etc. Anyway, thanks for reading. So, to preface this, I'm a lifelong sufferer of sleep paralysis, so I recognize that there's a very good chance this incident was just sleep paralysis. But there are a few reasons I think it could be an abduction, and I thought it would be fun to share with you guys and see what you all think. The incident happened when I was maybe 16, so around 2002. My parents were out of town and I was sleeping in their bed. I awoke in the middle of the night, totally paralyzed. My body slowly started levitating until I was floating about 3 feet above the bed. Then, I floated sideways towards the exterior wall. The path my body floated on was a perfect 90-degree angle, and my body stayed totally flat. I was on my back. I wasn't limp or dangling in any way. When I reached the exterior wall, my body passed through it, and I could feel the wall going through, but it didn't hurt or anything. The instant my whole body had passed through the wall, everything went black. I remember my emotions felt totally neutral. I wasn't scared or excited or anything, just calmly observing the situation. The next morning I woke up in bed, still in my parents' room, and I felt totally normal. At the time I just brushed it off as sleep paralysis and didn't give it a second thought. But the memory has remained vivid. Now, here are the reasons I think it may not have been sleep paralysis. My whole life, my sleep paralysis hallucinations have only ever been either demonic or horror in nature, or totally mundane, just of family members coming in and out of my room talking about random ordinary things. My sleep paralysis was always horror when I was younger, and at some point switched to mundane. This incident is the one and only time it was different, out of hundreds of episodes of sleep paralysis I've experienced. My body has never moved in any other episode. I've always just been paralyzed and firmly planted in my bed. At the time, my sleep paralysis episodes were always scary, and I would instantly be terrified at the onset, even before seeing or hearing something scary, versus being totally calm for this one. my sleep paralysis episodes have only ever ended one of two ways. Either I struggle hard enough and can wake myself up for real, or I fall back asleep, but it's a bit of a gradual transition, versus the instantaneous blackness that ended this episode. At this point in my life, I had never slept or woken up on my back before. I've always been a side sleeper, and the first time I ever woke up on my back, other than this incident, was when I was pregnant with my first baby at age 29. I haven't really been seeking it out, but I've seen a few alien abduction shows over the past year or so, and listening to all these people recount their stories made me think about this incident. I've had an MRI of my head and dental x-rays done since the incident, and nothing out of the ordinary has shown up on them, so I guess I can say I have no metal implants of any kinds, if that was in fact an abduction. Anyway, I think that's it. If you've listened this far, thank you, and let me know what you think. Never spoke about this before, but thought I would share. When I was in grade 4 or 5, I started having these encounters that I assume may be dreams. The part that bothers me though is that I never seen an alien movie at this point in time other than Independence Day. Here is how it went. It happened a few times. I lived in the country in Canada, in a town of maybe 100 or so called Cardiff. Our backyard just went straight to the woods. I was always a bit nervous towards evening for paranoia of bears. Sometimes I had my curtains closed, other times open. I woke up the first night in the morning, maybe 1 or 2. The house was very quiet, and looking up I could see out the window, but barely as it was very dark. However, I had a feeling something was out there. I was worried it was a bear that I saw moving. I got up and moved to the window and closed my curtains. Now my room had a little light due to the nightlight I used, as I was scared of the dark. After closing the curtains, I went back to bed, covering myself up, thinking, the bear is outside, it's fine. I tried going back to sleep and occasionally opened my eyes as I was nervous still. I was about to fall asleep and opened my eyes one last time in an attempt to stay awake, and my eyes widened. My curtains were open again, as well as a small window the screen was on. I jumped up in my bed, confused, thinking I closed this, and heard rustling outside. I looked to the right and noticed also my bedroom door was closed, which made me nervous as it's always open due to being scared of the dark and being alone. I got up out of the bed again. I opened my door and I went to close the window and curtains. I stopped to stare outside to see if I could see the bear, but being dark I couldn't see shapes, but I heard movement, like walking in the grass from multiple directions. I'm thinking there's 2 bears outside, or maybe some wolves, although I'd never seen wolves in the area before. I closed the window and the curtains and walked back to my bed. Before going in, I noticed some light outside. I was thinking we don't have any light for the backyard. I walked over and peered behind the curtain from the right side of the window. Outside, I saw 3 tall, grey-like humanoids. They seemed to be roughly the height of an adult. No clothes, black eyes that were maybe double our eye size. No hair, just staring at me. I was stuck in a panic or something. I just kept staring back. After a moment, I closed the curtain and went back to my bed and threw a blanket over me, telling myself it's just a bad dream. After a few, I could hear sounds around my bed. I didn't take the blanket off me. I didn't feel anything touch me, but I could hear the walking around me. I'm not sure why they didn't touch me. Eventually, I woke up and it was morning. my door was open and my curtains open. I chalked it up to a bad dream of weird creatures. This similar scenario happened several times. I'm not sure why I never screamed. Possibly I was scared of my mum yelling at me, as when I had a bad dream and went to her, she'd yell at me and say go back to bed, it's just a bad dream. Not sure if this is a dream or an encounter. Not sure if I'll be able to recall more of it since it was roughly 20 years ago. I know it bothers me a lot, but with anxiety, I'm too nervous to try to remember more on the off chance it's not a bad dream. Anyways, that's my story for now. Any comments are welcome. Maybe any questions will help me remember more also. Who knows? Thanks. This experience happened approximately 2 years ago. I seemed to recover a memory of an event that would have taken place about 4 to 5 years before remembering it. I haven't shared this because I don't know what to make of it. I didn't know what to make of it for a long time. Things have become a bit clearer, to the point that I now feel confident that this was a repressed memory. I had never followed UFO stories before this. I was skeptical of such things, and would have been very afraid of aliens if I had taken such things seriously. The only knowledge of aliens I had then was through pop culture. I'm just going to jump in at what happened that triggered the memory. I had just read an email from my brother where he opened up to me for the first time about some difficult and unusual experiences he'd had throughout his life. We've tried to keep in contact, but were raised in different states and households. The email primarily detailed his clairvoyant experiences. He'd keep these things to himself, though he'd apparently been having these experiences all his life. I didn't know what to think about what I'd just read. I did trust him, and I knew he certainly wasn't hallucinating. It was getting late, so I went to bed. As soon as I laid my head on my pillow, I started to dream. In the dream, I'm riding with my partner on our long commute home from work. We commuted an hour and a half to work and home each day for a few years. I was wearing the clothes I wore during that period, and it was summertime. Up ahead we could see some people pulled off the road, standing outside their cars in a small grouping. They're all looking up at the clouds. We look up and see that the clouds look very odd. We pull the car over and get out. I bring my bag for some reason. I'm a woman, so maybe out of habit, or not wanting to leave it in the car. It looks like a very strange cloud formation. We're all marveling at it. It looks like a horizontal vortex, like a funnel on its side. It's large at one end, gets skinnier, and comes almost to a point and tapers off. As we're looking at this cloud formation, a large sphere comes through the cloud. The sphere is very large. It's maybe 30 feet around and a perfect sphere. The sphere was transparent, but had a peach-colored hue. You could clearly see it, but you could also see through it, if that makes sense. It was about an hour and a half near sunset. The sky itself was getting a bit peach-colored, so I thought maybe the sphere was reflecting that. It was a pinkish peach. Just as we're all stunned by the sphere coming out of the cloud, another one comes out. This one looks the same, but it's a little further back. At this point, my memories reflect a trance-like state that seemed to come over us. If you've ever been in a trance, you can attest that you don't notice that you're in a trance or feel any differently. You can still think, and you experience yourself the same as usual. My first thought was, should I take a picture of that? A voice answered my thoughts as if I'd said them aloud. The voice came as if it was from a woman standing in front of all of us. This seemed very normal at the time, though there hadn't been any woman standing there. The voice said something to the effect of, "No need. Everyone will be aware in a year's time." I thought, oh, this is it then. They're coming to show themselves to everyone. I don't believe this is true though. It has been longer than a year since then. The next thing I know, I'm being carried. I don't know by what or how. I only know I was being carried because I protested. I didn't mind being carried away, as everything seemed so right. I was protesting because they were leaving my bag on the ground where I'd been standing. The things in my bag are important to me. My wallet and everything else I need to keep on me and keep up with. Eventually, they did grab my bag, and I relaxed and seemed to lose awareness completely. The next thing I recall is a brief memory of walking up steep, all-white stairs. The group of people that had been by the road are here as well. No one was talking or looking around, just silently walking up the stairs. The stairs were white and quite steep, I thought. The next thing I know is another brief memory. I'm walking up the stairs again, seemingly the same steep white stairs. This time, I'm alone and completely nude. I remember thinking it was very unusual to be naked like I was, and feeling so at ease about it. I thought it was almost funny. My next memory is of coming to laying on a narrow, silver table. There are people or beings standing nearby, one by my head, one by my feet, and then a few farther away from the table where I'm lying. They seem to be in the middle of a debate about whether or not to put me back to sleep or into whatever state I'd just been in. I can't say for sure I was asleep since, at times, I seemed to be able to walk upstairs at least. One seems to feel they should put me back under, but the other is reluctant because of the long drive I had to make. They seem to reason that if they do it again, it could affect my ability to get home safely. I'm allowed to remain conscious, though I'm awake, I'm not fully myself. I'm still more relaxed and agreeable than usual. These people were not at all humans as we know humans to be. They had the basic human shape. Their arms, legs, and heads were all in the same position and roughly the same proportions as ours. They were tall and slender. The strangest thing about their appearance was their skin. Their skin was nearly translucent, though I saw one of them across the room putting something on their skin that matched the appearance of the others. So I'm not sure what to make of that. To describe the appearance of their skin, I would say it looked like silicone. It was peach-colored, like the sphere had been. They had no hair that I could see. Their eyes were larger than ours. Other than that, I have difficulty remembering the details when I tried to recall exactly what they looked like. I can't say what their mouths looked like. I assume they had mouths, though I don't remember seeing their mouths, which is strange considering I carried on a conversation with one of them for at least several minutes in close proximity. I was certainly close enough to see the details of their appearance. I can't say whether they had noses or not either. Their eyes are a little bit clearer in my memory, but only slightly. But I remember their bodies and skin clearly. I thought about their bodies and skin, and my thoughts at the time seemed to act as a sort of anchor for my memories. I know that sounds strange, but that's my observation. They all seem to be female to me. I don't know if this is true or if this was just another way to make me more comfortable. I have no idea. While lying on the table, the one at my feet was doing something to my body. I have no idea what they were doing with it. It didn't actually touch me, that I recall anyway. They were running their hands just above my legs. I didn't feel anything from it. While that was happening, the one at my head started to ask me some questions. First, she asked me about my partner. She repeated what my partner had told them in a questioning way. From what they said, I could tell that my partner had given them a false name and told them a story to escape this whole thing. That sounded exactly like something my partner would do. She would not submit to something like this voluntarily. I'm far more curious and probably naive, to be honest, than my partner. I essentially told them that. They seemed to know that already, but I think they wanted me to verify that. I think they were a little perplexed at her response. Just like me insisting on my bag, whatever state of mind they were able to put us in didn't seem to have the ability to override any strong will. They referred to themselves as angels. I don't recall at what point I was told this, but I knew they weren't actually angels. But that was how they referred to themselves when interacting with us. They asked me whether I wanted to help people by saying, "You want to help people, right?" I was a little taken aback because at this time in my life, I didn't not want to help people, but I had problems of my own that I was dealing with. But I said yes because in my heart, I did want to help people. They said, "This will help with that." I was allowed to leave shortly after that, though my memory ends with me confirming that I could go now. They confirmed the clothes I'd been wearing with me. Then, the next thing I know, I'm back on my bed with my eyes wide open, staring off into the corner towards the ceiling of my bedroom. I have had several unusual experiences in the years following when this would have occurred, but before the memory resurfaced, and some since. I was going to include more of those in this post, but I didn't realize how long this would be. I may make another post to share some of the things at some point. A lot had changed in my life between the time this would have taken place and the time I remembered it. The personal problems I'd been dealing with had reached a dramatic crescendo, resulting in me starting meditation. I had to start meditating because I'd tried everything else and I simply couldn't go on any longer in my mental state without something changing. I never had any memory at all of this event before this night. I asked my partner the following morning and have talked to her about it since, and she has no memory of a strange cloud formation or anything unusual ever happening. I never noticed any missing time. So, I live in the southwest of the UK. Years ago, when I was 17, this would be about 15 years ago, I got kicked out by my mum, who I was living with, because we had an argument. I wandered the streets that night, trying to stay awake. I asked my friends if I could stay with them, but that wasn't an option, unfortunately. At the time, I lived in a relatively new suburban area, so I decided to walk into the nearby woods that overlooked some farmland, hoping to watch the stars and find a place to sleep. This was around 2 a.m. There was a large wooded area near some flats, and I crawled through a thicket, which led to an open space. As I walked through, it was pitch black, and I thought this would be a nice, safe area to try and sleep. As I laid down, suddenly I heard footsteps. They sounded heavy and loud, and it sounded like they were circling me. I froze and asked if anyone was there. The footsteps got faster and faster, pacing around me. Then I heard a deep growl. It sounded big. I panicked and ran away, through the thicket and onto the street. At the time, I had about £100 in my bank account, so I wandered to a nearby hotel to see if I could get a room, but they would not let me in. I was cold, desperate and scared, so I walked to a nearby 24-hour shop, bought some snacks, a torch, flashlight for you Americans, and made my way back to the thicket. This time, I was armed with a light. When I returned to the woods, I heard the footsteps again. I quickly turned on the torch, shining it all around, looking for where the footsteps were coming from, but I couldn't see anything. Then, I heard the growl again. It was deep and reverberating. It sounded like it was right next to me. I could hear it, but not see it, but it sounded big. No matter how much I shone the torch, I could not see what was making the noise. I ran away to a nearby bus stop and spent the night there, awake but scared. The next day I met up with a friend and told her what happened. I wanted to investigate, so me and her went to go through the thicket into this open space. She was scared after the story I told her, but it was broad daylight. I went in again, and she stayed outside. I heard the growl again, really loud and really close. It was daylight though. I could hear it, but not see it. I know this sounds made up, but please believe me. It scares the hell out of me, and no one believes what I witnessed. If anyone has any similar stories, please let me know. I will be the first to admit, I thought these types of cryptids were a joke and not real, and I've never been able to take them seriously. I am an outdoorsman and have been for 35 years. I grew up in the woods. I memorized trees for mushroom hunting for a living. I knew every brook, stream, bush, berry grove, log, you name it. I'm on a forest road and I'm on hour 9 of not a soul in sight. I gather some mushrooms and look up the road to see a rock has fallen from the loose, steep side of the mountain to the middle of the road. I make a mental note that I have to move it and not drive over it. I gather my mushrooms and get back to the car. I look up and see what appears to be a 2 or 2.5 foot tall little brown thing walking the side of the road over to the rock. My first logical thought is that it's a squirrel, but I see it is walking on 2 legs. It appears to be wearing brown cloth or fur clothes, and is shaped like a human, but very tiny. It's not scurrying either. It's ambling on 2 legs like a human would, just casually walking like this is some normal, regular-ass thing, like monotonous work it does for a living. I don't believe my lying eyes. It has to be something else. I get back in the car and head up the road and see that the rock has been pushed back to the side of the road from whence it came. It had fallen off the hill, rolled to my left, then was sitting back on the other side of the road on the right. There are drag marks like someone slid it back. I look, I smell, I sense, I listen. Nothing. I don't know where gnomes live, but the old, partially logged section where I was looked pretty perfect for a clan of these things. Lots of places to hide, secluded, near water, plenty of routes of escape, and would be easy to dig little holes in the mountain and be fortified against invaders. The side road into it was flooded and appears to do so regularly, so these little guys even have their own moat. I'm positive I'm overthinking this. It was a long drive back up the mountain, then down the mountain the other way, and some time home, and I can't pick this apart into anything else but being a tiny little forest man. I'm like 1000% positive that I saw what I saw. It was near a military special interest zone, allegedly blocked off due to some native butterflies. But I'm starting to wonder if this research area is really about butterflies after all. They send you to prison, ban you from parks, and give you a $5,000 fine if you take a single berry from inside that boundary. This is the story of an experience I had in Cradle Mountain National Park in Tasmania, Australia, in my early teens. Despite causing no physical injury, it has haunted me into adulthood. I grew up in a family of avid hikers, both my mother, a botanist, and my father, a biologist for the University of Tasmania, would regularly visit the deepest wilderness areas of Tasmania during their field studies. These trips were disguised as camping and hiking adventures for the family. I never minded, as I was just as passionate about the outdoors as they were, even from a young age. Keyword being was, as after what I went through, even 20 plus years later, I still refused to return. We lived on a property a short driving distance from Lake St. Clair, a popular tourist destination. This was the only place my parents would allow me to camp and experience the wilderness alone, as long as I brought my German Shepherd with me. He was a former police dog and very well trained. At 12 or 13 years old, I didn't mind. It felt like my own little slice of freedom in my own little slice of wilderness, despite being surrounded by people. It was easy to ignore them, but as I got older and more brazen, I found myself hounding my parents to let me take my quad bike deeper into the park to camp, to test my own abilities and prove to them that I was capable of doing so and that I wasn't a little kid anymore. It was that overconfidence that led me to that situation and caused me this trauma. I was 15 at the time of the experience, at the age where I thought I was invincible, knew all there was to know, and was untouchable. After asking my parents for what felt like an uncountable number of times and being told no just as many times, I had enough and decided to just go. I told my parents that I and a few friends were going to the lake to camp and do some fishing over the weekend. Instead, I took my tent, my quad, and headed to the reserve. I left just after sunrise to maximize daylight and to make it as far in as I felt comfortable. Once arriving, I set up camp, had some food, and decided to go for an explore. I knew of a spot nearby with a gorgeous rock face where fossils had been found in the past, so I thought I'd try my luck. Shortly into the walk, I realized I'd been turned around and had no idea where I was anymore. At the time, I didn't see it as that big of a deal, as I had a compass and knew that if I headed south, it would take me back to the lake, and I could walk from there. However, by this time it was getting late in the afternoon, so, stupidly, I decided to take my chances and make it back to my camp and quad bike, so I wasn't walking back to camp from the lake in the dark. Big mistake. It was about 4:30 p.m. and the sun had begun to dip below the tree line, casting dark shadows across my walking path. That's when the forest went silent. And when I say silent, I mean silent. No wind, no birds, no forest sounds at all, which made my heart rate skyrocket. It was getting dark and the silence was suffocating. I just wanted to get back to my camp light a fire, eat some snacks and spend my night watching nature's television until I fell asleep. That's when, from every direction, I would hear the sound of twigs cracking and something moving in the canopy above me. No big deal, probably birds or other small animals, I thought. But then, clear as day,
"Hey, come here."
At first I felt relieved, as I thought someone along the trails had seen me, noticed I was a bit disheveled, and wanted to help. But looking around, I saw no one. Then it happened again, but behind me this time. The same voice, but I noticed it was coming from up in the trees. I responded, "I can't see you. Where are you?" and asked for some help because I thought I just couldn't see the person calling out. But then it happened again, from my left this time. That's when I decided to run. I took off into the brush and ran for a good 2 minutes before I stopped to catch my breath and look at my compass to start making my way towards the lake. I was terrified, but felt I had covered enough distance that I wasn't in immediate danger. But seconds after checking my compass and starting to walk, I heard it again.
"Hey, come here."
But this time, it was right behind me. I spun around and saw absolutely nothing, so I began sprinting again and didn't stop. The last thing I heard before bursting out of the trees onto the lakefront was the most evil, demonic laugh I'd ever heard. It sounded like 3 people laughing at once. I immediately called my parents to come and get me, told them what I did and what happened, but they were more focused on my disobedience than my experience. The moment they picked me up was the first time I felt relief, and I cried the whole drive home. I didn't sleep properly for days. My dad went and picked up my quad and tidied up my camp. Since that day, I haven't stepped foot away from the lake. If anyone has had an experience like this, I'd love to hear it, because it took my passion from me. I miss being out away from society, but I just can't bring myself to do it. This story takes place in November of 2022. At the time, I drew a special elk tag in the Beaverhead mountain range of central/east Idaho. I had hunted in this area many times before over the years, and I know the area like the back of my hand. It became a place of comfort and good memories. It still is, but I haven't looked at it the same since the story I am about to tell. I planned for a week-long trip for the first week of November and took one of my best friends with me. We spent the first 4 days hiking up and down various ridges, chasing elk and having a blast. The nights were spent storytelling and eating soup by the stove. Mind you, it was November in Idaho, so it was very cold. It was the 4th night of the trip. It had snowed during the day, and a fresh layer of snow lay on the ground. The sky had since cleared up, and a very cold, but still and quiet air had settled in. My friend and I had gotten into a deep discussion about the Bible, spirits, cryptids, skinwalkers, etc. I should note that my friend had at the time been experiencing a decline in his mental health, and it was not uncommon for him to sometimes behave erratically. This will be relevant later in the story. During this conversation, I felt an intense fear kind of settled on me. It almost felt like the air had become tense. I had the urge to change the discussion to something else, but that's when it happened. Within 20 or 30 yards of the tent, what I thought at first was a coyote began yipping and barking very, very loudly. I looked at my friend, who became excited and told me to grab my gun so we could go look for this thing. It was strange though, and something didn't feel right. The animal, whatever it was, didn't exactly sound like a coyote. It almost shrieked as opposed to yipping the way coyotes do. And it would occasionally bark, and at times almost scream. I'm also an experienced outdoorsman, and any other hunter knows a coyote would not approach a tent in the middle of nowhere and draw attention to itself. It would continue to vocalize for about 3 to 5 minutes at a time, circling the tent from a distance. I reluctantly grabbed my rifle and my spotlight, a very bright, intense flashlight, and started looking for this thing. As I stepped about 10 yards away from the tent, I heard it again, directly in front of me, shrieking, barking, etc. I shined my light directly at it. I could see probably 150 to 200 yards in front of me, yet nothing was there. No eyes shining in the light, no outline of an animal or person, nothing. After repeating this same scenario 3 or 4 times, we gave up and went back in the tent to warm up. But the sound wouldn't stop. At one point, when it went silent, my friend poked his head out of the tent and yelled, "Hey, shut up!" He was immediately answered with a scream from the animal. At times, it sounded like it came from above the tent in the tree we were camped under. I tried playing it off as a coyote or maybe a hunting dog that got lost, but I could not convince myself that it was either of those, and we ignored it for the rest of the time. It slowly started getting further and further away from the tent, until it finally stopped about an hour or so later. The next morning I looked around the area for tracks, yet, to my surprise, I found nothing but our own. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the trip, and a few days later we went home. Now, I don't know if it is all related, but about 3 months after this, my friend had a complete mental breakdown and has since never been on a hunting trip. Some of his family, a deeply religious family, questioned whether he was a victim of some spiritual attack or something of that nature. I didn't correlate the two at the time, but in hindsight, I have so many questions about that night. Is it a coincidence? Whatever that animal was appeared during that particular conversation? Could it have actually been a coyote or wolf? Why couldn't I see any eyes gleaming with the flashlight? Did this incident have something to do with my friend's mental decline? My friend would sometimes tell me and others about strange things he saw or heard. Was this related? If anyone has anything to point out, please share. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. I haven't been able to stop thinking about this incident and wanted to see if it resonates with anyone else. Me, male 28, my wife, female 28, and my dog, male 3, recently went to Red River Gorge, a state park in southeast Kentucky. We're no strangers to camping in the park, having been there at least 20 times over the past 8 years. We chose a spot I've been to 2 or 3 times before. It's worth noting that this site is outside of other dispersed camping areas and is essentially the only proper spot with car parking along a 2-mile stretch of road. There's a dilapidated barn about a mile up from where we drove in, and a cemetery about 1/3 of a mile in the opposite direction. Otherwise, it's a rarely traveled road. And we saw no one all day, just an occasional car, maybe 1 or 2 an hour. The spot is at the base of a 30-foot incline that a 4x4 could handle. Our SUV was parked horizontally at the top, blocking other vehicles from descending. From there, it's about 30 yards into the campground, with another slope leading to the river's edge and swimming hole. The day went great. We spent time near the beach, letting our dogs swim, then did typical camping activities like hiking, foraging, chopping wood, throwing the hatchet, and enjoying a few beers. Once sunlight began to fade, around 6:30, we started the fire and began cooking dinner. As darkness fell and the last light disappeared, we heard the usual sounds: squirrels rustling, things falling into the leaves, which spooked my wife a bit, but we didn't think much of it. Then, at about 9 p.m., sitting around a healthy fire and listening to music, we heard heavy shuffling in the leaves. Definitely something large or heavy. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the road, about halfway between us and our car. I stopped the music, and after about 10 seconds of dead silence, we heard the shuffling again. Before I could call out, we heard this strange and unnatural noise. Something like a throttling, ascending pitch mixed with a shriek. Neither of us can verbally describe it, and I can confidently say I've never heard anything like it before. It was about 20 to 25 feet away, just outside the reach of my headlamp. Our dog went insane, hair standing on end, barking incessantly into the darkness. He was on a long lead, or I'm sure he would have taken off after it. My wife and I were frozen. I was holding my hatchet and trying to catch any movement or sound to track. After about 2 to 3 minutes of that, with no further noises, I calmed the dog and we grabbed some essentials and hurried to the car. Our adrenaline was pumping as we discussed coyotes, foxes, or other animals as the possible culprits. I didn't want to mention the possibility of people, as that would have heightened the paranoia. We eventually passed out after about an hour, but I spent the rest of the night in and out of shallow sleep, feeling very uncomfortable, both mentally and physically. I've always struggled to sleep anyway, except fully horizontal. At around 3 a.m., right next to my head, I heard a singular knock on my window, like someone tapped the glass with one knuckle. My wife didn't wake up, and I scanned the outside of the car, but didn't see or hear anything. I struggled to doze off again, and my heartbeat was rapid. When we finally got the first light around 7 a.m., we cooked breakfast, packed up our campsite, and got the hell out of Dodge. No prints or anything out of sorts with our remaining belongings either. What's strange to me is that after hearing the noise, we heard no additional heavy shuffling from the source. With our dog barking so aggressively, we should have heard whatever was moving away. We've looked up various animal noises native to the gorge, and nothing even remotely resembles what we heard. The knock on the window was also isolated. There were no other noises or visible happenings outside the car immediately following. Lastly, I had a thought the day after we left. I remember whistling for our dog after dark, since we had some scraps to give him near the fire. Immediately, I thought, shit, I shouldn't have whistled. But up until this trip, I've never been a believer of those superstitions. I just like to respect the folklore I've heard. In hindsight, we're now convinced I may have invited a Wendigo or Skinwalker to our camp. I won't take those superstitions lightly again, and I'm sure this occurrence will affect at least my next few overnights in those woods. From when I was 3 to 10 years old, my family lived in a tiny, second-floor walk-up apartment in a large city. Our apartment was long and narrow, and my family had to walk through my bedroom to get to the bathroom, so it was a cramped lifestyle, to say the least. Around when I turned 8, my parents decided to offer me a bit of privacy, asking me if I wanted to move into a separate bedroom that had its own entrance and exit from the entry stairwell. It was extremely small, basically a closet, but I was eager to move in there because it was private and at least away from my parents and baby brothers. From the very first night they moved my bed into this room, I saw a very dark, shadowy presence fading in and out of the wall. It had no eyes, but razor teeth. Its mouth opened to silently scream. I thought I was going crazy. I never told another soul about it. I saw it nearly every night for 2 years. It was tall and thin and a living shadow. That's all I can do to describe it. The walls were plastered with children's animal-themed wallpaper from the previous owners. If I recall, it had strange little toy animals, repeated over and over. Because of the bizarre events happening in that room, this innocent decor seemed ominous. My mother would occasionally come into my room to check on me, and I would be soaked through my pajamas in my own sweat from hiding under the cheap blankets. I was petrified of that room. I was living in hell, but I had no options, because my baby brothers now slept in my old room. I became sleep deprived and unhealthy. I think my teachers might have commented on my deteriorating mental state to my parents. Over that time, I became obsessed with the occult and paranormal. Now that I'm over 50 years old, I feel like that same shadowy entity is still inside me and has been with me my entire life. Could I be possessed by it?
My entire life, I was followed around multiple states from my childhood to adulthood. I'm not sure who or what it was, but it always found me. It seemed to be trying hard to make me extremely uncomfortable. I was a Christian as a kid, and whenever I used religious calls, prayers and phrases, it would go away for a while. I spent most of my life pretending not to notice anything. Things moving, a weight on my bed next to me, strange sounds when it was quiet. I eventually lost my belief in Judeo-Christianism and was given advice by a pagan friend on how to get rid of it. Most of the advice was a huge lifestyle and personality change. Stay positive, know your power over them, and eliminate unnecessary worry and fear. It worked. It took practice, but it worked completely. She explained to me that religion is usually used in these situations because it is total belief. Belief strengthens intent. But if you have strong intent without belief, it is exactly the same. Either way, my problem was solved for a while. I ended up getting married and having kids. That made things start happening again in whichever home we lived. I noticed that it was much more difficult to fight negative with positive when there are 5 other people in your home to add to the negative. I can't make them change the way I had to as a young adult. Since then, I've seen signs of activity and immediately turned up my protection a notch. The activity goes away but comes back if I let my guard down. It's been back and forth, and I've always handled it pretty well. But about a week ago I had my first nightmare in years. My youngest daughter and wife also had nightmares that night. I immediately noticed the signs and took my usual steps to make it go away again. It hasn't been working, and the next night I was in the kitchen late at night and my dog started growling, baring teeth, and had his hair standing on end. He's literally never done this. I've had him for 7 months and never heard him growl unless he's playing with a toy with our other dog. The same night when I was putting my daughter to sleep, she looked over to the window, glared and then grabbed onto me and squeezed. She kept trying to sneak peeks back over there. The blinds were drawn and the windows were closed. This was the 3rd time that day that I saw her staring at nothing, confused and scared. She's been falling over a lot more lately, sometimes bruising herself. Last night, I told my wife about these signs and asked her to try and stay positive. Stop stressing so much, the basics. This is not the first time we've had these conversations, and she agreed and understood. We went to sleep and I slept horribly. My wife told me about half hour ago that at 2 a.m.-ish, my daughter was sleeping on our bed at the foot, which she doesn't usually do because she loves to snuggle, and she started screaming horribly. She wasn't moving any part of her body, like it was being held still for her. Her eyes were wide open and she was just screaming bloody murder. I'm at work, but my first instinct is to haul ass home and confront it like I have done in the past. But I'm not in the right state to do so, and I'm just too angry, and that'll only feed it. My real problem is, I think I've passed a piece of it to my daughter, like a GD virus. The techniques I've been using for 7 years aren't working anymore, and I don't know what to do. I have 2 teenagers and a very stressed out wife. The negativity in my house is off the charts, and if anyone has any advice, it's certainly appreciated.
This was a few years ago. I purchased my childhood home with my husband. The first couple of years we had a toxic roommate who would put us against each other. Over time he ended up staying in his room all the time, falling into a depression. He found a boyfriend and moved out. I wasted no time turning the spare room into a guest quarters. I started having horrible insomnia, so to allow my husband to sleep undisturbed, I moved to the guest room. This is where things got dark. I finally found a healthy sleeping pattern that was working for me and getting real sleep. That's when the nightmares started. A clown was in the closet, but not any clown. A demonic, evil, twisted clown. Side note, I am not afraid of clowns in the slightest. He kept telling me that I was to be his bride, and that I needed to kill everyone I loved in order to bring him fully into this world. And in my nightmares, I would plan with him and agree. I would wake up, and the closet door, which had been closed and latched with an old school hook and eye latch, would be wide open, and everything in it disheveled. I feared the ex-roommate's depression had opened a doorway for darkness to enter, as he was in a vulnerable state when he occupied the room. After weeks and weeks of these nightmares every night, I decided to cleanse the house. I opened the front door and burned sage. My husband and I both have indigenous ancestry, so the burning of sage is a cleanse our ancestors held sacred. I started in the attic, making certain the smoke touched even the darkest corners, and cleansed room by room. When I began in the spare room, the light bulb exploded, the doorknobs rattled. I did not stop. I pushed until I felt the energy leave the house. My husband, who was outside with our dog, knew when it was over. I never said a word because he saw the darkness shoot out the front door. We've had no issues since. The nightmares stopped immediately. The closet door remained closed and latched. But I will never forget the hopelessness and darkness I felt in those dreams. I will never know why it showed itself to me as a clown.
I live with my dad, sister and cousin. My cousin is male and 16 years old, and for some reason decided to summon some demons for wealth, good mental health and one thing or another. This was about 1.5 years ago, and I was completely unaware of this until he started talking about some weird dreams he'd been having. He then described all the exact details of the dream, beside being in different locations of the house that I had a few nights before, and that's when I got really worried. Here's the dream. So I start in the dream in my room, which is at the top level of my 3-story house. And I have an impending doom feeling, so I look down to my stairs and there it is. A dark shadow standing halfway down them, so I run at it, trying to run past it to get downstairs. And for some reason I stop right in front of it, feeling the worst burning inside, and impending doom feeling I've ever experienced, and it just morphs into a dark shadow cat. Then I kind of snap out of it and start running to the basement of the house, all while it's following me. I get to my dad's room and start beating on the door and screaming, trying to get him to open it, and everything just slowly starts to lose sound as the cat comes closer, and I'm screaming but no sound comes out. Then I woke myself up from a whimpering type scream, and my cousin said he had the exact same dream, but it started at his room, which is the basement as well. The shadow person morphs. He beats on my dad's door and the cat rubs against his leg and he wakes up. If that wasn't strange enough on its own, he has started to hear voices calling his name, getting closer and louder each time, telling him to wake up, even when he's at school and away from home. And today he went to walk to the buses and there was a humanish shadow figure standing near a barn, accompanied by the sound of thumping that got louder and louder. He said he tries to call out to it, but it wouldn't respond, and it set off the motion detector lights at the barn, and it just still remained a dark, shadowy figure. The thumping continued to get louder, until it just stopped, and the figure just disappeared. That has been pretty much how it's been for a while. I have other odd experiences as well, but my question is, does anyone know what it is? And if there's any way that I can protect myself from it, or make it go away.
On November 25th, at 4 a.m., I woke up in a panic. I have been having sleep paralysis this whole month. It happens every November, and whenever I am stressed. This time was different though. I woke up and was able to pull out of my sleep paralysis fairly quickly. But I felt this intense feeling of something staring at me with deep hatred. I sat up fast and looked around my room, something I never do. Usually, after having a sleep paralysis episode, I dig deeper into my covers because it's frightening. But this time, I felt scared and in danger. At the doorway of my room was this 8 to 10 foot tall thing. It had a goat head, I don't remember seeing horns on it, and a gorilla body. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight on and shined it. I didn't feel brave enough to shine it at its face, but illuminated it enough to see its body and a bit of its face. I saw enough and screamed, a long scream. To be honest, I purposely screamed for a long time so my dad would come and save me, embarrassingly enough. Luckily my parents live with me and my dad did end up barging into my room. He stayed at the doorway for a second, scanning my room, then ran in. When he ran in, he ran through the demon-looking thing. It grimaced when my dad walked through it, and it dispersed. My dad ended up hugging me for a little bit, before we had a sleepover in the living room with the cats. I know I'm too damn old to have my dad hugging me to sleep. 30, female. But that thing looked frightening. My dad is nearing 60 and very into Catholicism, almost to an extreme, as he grew up seeing what his grandmother had to go through as a curandera, a village healer. He says he sees a lot of ghosts and demons. He always has his prayer music on. He wasn't always like this. He always said he could see the supernatural, but he wasn't religious before. He got into a really stressful situation a few years ago, and all of this magnified to where he is now. And to be honest, I thought this was religious psychosis. I'm not religious at all, as the Catholic Church traumatized me growing up. And honestly, I was really hoping all these ghosts, shadows, demons I was seeing was just an overactive REM cycle, or my mind filling in the blanks. But this goat head, gorilla body thing looked so real and freaked me out when the flashlight didn't make it go away. Any thoughts on this? Edit. A year ago when I first got my house, I fell asleep on the floor of my room because I didn't have any furniture yet. I fell asleep to some frequency sounds, and during the night, it must have skipped over to another video. The video was a picture of a priest praying with a Bible at a group of people, maybe demons. It was a reddish picture from what I can remember. The sound was a priest chanting an exorcist prayer in Latin. This didn't wake me up. What did wake me up was something that tapped my foot twice. I woke up and heard that chanting, and it spooked me, and I turned it off. I was hoping that tapping was just a nervous tick, like my foot twitching or something. But now, I'm wondering about that experience too.
Back in 2015, I had this experience that made me realize the world is a stranger place than I thought it was. It was around 8 p.m. and I was coming back home from the movies. I dashed my foot against a stone and my body started to run against my will. A supernatural force had hijacked my legs that made me sprint extraordinarily. I finally managed to halt and walk normally after being played with for about 2 kilometers, which is a long way. As I tried to gather some sense of what happened, I saw something unusual in front of me. Near the signpost of an SDA church that I was a member of, there was a glowing shadow, a diabolical silhouette that just appeared, and what made it creepy was that its half was waist downwards, and it had no upper body. I was struck with fright. I knew my mind could not just make up such things, it was real. I started chanting Jesus' name several times, and I approached a stranger by the shops and rhapsodized to him what I'd seen, and requested him to accompany me to our gate. I didn't even see his face because it was so dark. He was not even shocked by my narration. I did not disclose anything to my parents as we had supper, but Dad noticed my unusual stillness. We prayed and departed to sleep, and that is where my nightmares began. I could not catch a wink of sleep. I tried to kill time by reciting an SDA fundamental belief about Jesus and Christians having power over the forces of darkness. This really calmed me down. Then late into the night I felt an ominous presence. The dog outside started barking and flapping its ears, and whenever that happened I got physically attacked by a force so strong that it was pressing down on me, as if it wanted to gain entry into my body. I later thought it was the upper part of the demon that also wanted to inhabit me. I sweated, cried, and prayed under my blankets as I longed for sunrise. It was the longest night ever. The next day I realized that my legs were unusually stiff, and that they could literally just walk up a hill or hop to a spot without me putting effort in. I had been possessed by a half-genie. My cousin had also commented on my unusual speed when I ran. We were together watering cattle at a river when I decided to exorcise the pesky demon. I immersed myself in the water and read out a scripture from my pocket testament. When I reached home, I washed my hands, which were also possessed, wrist downwards, and I knew this because I had to hold a pen, and the handwriting was terrible. Whenever I tried to write Holy Spirit, it's almost as if my hand would deny me. I also wetted my lower half, poured the contaminated water and got ready for the genie to be expelled. Not sure if I was stimulating a voice of an angel in my head or if it was real, but I started the process and began convulsing. My thigh muscles contracted severely, so did my hands, and something told me to count to 700, and my frozen hands could be set free. I don't know what could have happened if anybody had busted in during this weird stuff. But when I finished, that was that. I was very glad to be relieved of whatever the hell that was.
I think it started with the nightmares. I've had a history in the past with ghosts and ghouls. A ghost attached itself to my brother when we were younger and would angrily throw things. We named her Cadence. My sister said Cadence would play hide and seek with her, showing up in the corner of her eye, only to duck out of view and my sister would turn to look at her. When I moved out at 16, Cadence did not follow me. This is something different, more negative. It started earlier this week, like I said, with the nightmares. The first one was about Kisaragi Station. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I encountered many people at the station, and when I got on, I arrived at a giant field with a dog. I don't remember after that. I also don't remember the second nightmare. The third, however, was yesterday night. In it, I was being chased through a small portal under some stairs. Writing this now, I'm realizing my last apartment had a staircase with a giant hole under it. My cat ran under there once, and I felt nearly feral with primal fear that gripped me when I got close to the hole. The person chasing me was a cannibal. I don't know how I knew. I just knew. We eventually came to a standoff. I was so close to her, but just out of her sight. She was looking away, but all she had to do was turn. And that's what she did. She turned slowly, eyes wide as she stared at me. I stared back in complete terror. She saw me and reached out to me, gripping my hand harshly. I woke up slowly, filled with chest-crunching terror. I could still feel the woman's grip on my hand as I woke up, nearly crushing my fingers. For context, I sleep curled up every night, sometimes on my back, but never with my hand anywhere near the edge of my full-sized bed. I woke up with my hand dangling off the side of my bed, reaching out. I felt eyes on me from the closet and stared. With complete certainty, the only thought I had was demon. Spooked to hell, I stayed awake and considered asking my Catholic roommate to bless my room, or at least the apartment. Silly, right? But my roommate had done it before, and it was all fine. Until my cat broke their Mary statue. After the statue broke, the smells started. Like something rotted in our apartment. My roommate's senior cat started getting nervous too. She used to never meow. She meows constantly now. And one time, we even heard her on the other side of the apartment building while we were checking the mail. We just heard her screaming. Confused, we rushed back to our apartment on the other floor and opened our apartment door to find the cat staring at the door and practically howling. This morning, we found a huge blood stain on my roommate's pillow. Frowning, I checked her cat over because we thought maybe the cat had bled on it. She was spotless. My roommate shrugged it off and washed the blood stain off. Is this a demon? Can anyone give me some guidance on how to handle this? Update 1. Here I'll answer some of the more common questions. I'm not Catholic or Japanese. I'm actually native, and for the past 4 years I've been working hard on my journey of converting to Judaism. It seems so strange to me that a possible entity, as my roommate and I have taken to calling it in private, would target me, native and, as of right now, not aligned to a religion, especially not Catholicism, as opposed to my religious roommate. My roommate joked that maybe it was because this entity could smell the holiness on them, as opposed to me. I joked that that would make them all the more tempting, wouldn't it? I talked with some of my friends and looked over all of your advice, pondering what to do. In the end, with the help of my roommate, we covered all the mirrors in the house, specifically the one positioned directly across from my bed, left there by the previous tenants and glued to the wall. And my roommate created a splint for their Mary statue and covered her in holy water. They then holy watered the apartment. My roommate's godfather is a pastor, or priest, I'm not sure which is where they got the holy water. Strangely enough, the entity did not feel angry. My room, more specifically my closet, felt as if it were pouting more than anything. The entity isn't mad about what my roommate and I have done. It seems more annoyed and petulant. My friend suggested that maybe I leave some snacks out for it, to say that I meant no harm. I told him that interacting with it was the last thing I really wanted to do. Sleeping last night was strange, even if I didn't have a nightmare. Well, even if I didn't have a nightmare, my roommate, on the other hand, was not so lucky, and playfully complained to me that I had handed them the nightmare stick. I tried to sleep before my roommate, just for my own peace of mind. Unfortunately, I just couldn't. I curled up facing away from my closet, and even though a heat wave had just hit that day, I refused to come out of my blanket cocoon. Even as I started overheating severely, I just tried to sleep. But I could feel its eyes on me, just staring, annoyed, like I was being ridiculous. As I settled down, I kept getting flashes in my mind of grinning teeth and staring eyes. Although, even I can admit that I know that the brain does weird things when the body is falling asleep, especially as hopped up on fear as I was. I didn't manage to sleep then, unfortunately. I knew if I tried again, I wouldn't be able to get to sleep before 3 a.m. And I did not want to be trying to sleep at 3 a.m. Call me superstitious. So I hatched a plan. I would simply stay up past 3 a.m. and go to sleep at 4 a.m. so that this entity wouldn't inflict me with nightmares. And, well, it worked. It hit 4 a.m. on the dot, and I shut my laptop down. I took my headphones off. It was so silly. I couldn't help but laugh quietly to myself. I turned over and went to sleep and dreamed about the heatwave. More recent update. Hi, it has been quite a few months since I moved out. It was a carbon monoxide leak. I had been stewing in carbon monoxide for months. Everybody, please check your carbon monoxide alarms. I'm all good now. Thank you all so much for the support. Just a note from Papa. Even though the author of this one did tell me it was a carbon monoxide leak, I thought it was a good story and a good warning to everyone to check for things like carbon monoxide leaks before jumping to conclusions.